respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland, so thank you for watching my channel. Just hours ago, roughly 11:30 this morning, Rishi Sunak was appointed Prime Minister by His Gracious Majesty King Charles III. For scintilla temporis, there was no Prime Minister since Liz Truss had gone to tender her resignation to the King, and of course her last act of Prime Ministerial advice to His Britannic Majesty was to send for Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. So Sunak went to kiss hands, and that's it. Sunak became leader of the Conservative Party at 2 p.m. yesterday because he's the only validly nominated candidate to be leader of the party. That's the governing party. And as you may know, the King will appoint as Prime Minister whoever can command the confidence of the House of Commons. And there are 360 MPs in the House of Commons, 357 of whom are Conservatives, so that's a majority. And he is leader of the Conservative Party. King appointed him, that's that. So then Rishi Sunak, he drove back to Downing Street. Now, I'm not quite sure why he wasn't appointed yesterday. Perhaps as a pious Hindu, he would wish to wait for the more auspicious day of Diwali, which is today. So what a gift it is to Hindus all around the world. Rishi Sunak, who famously took his oath of loyalty to the crown when he was elected MP 7 years ago on a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, one of the Hindu sacred texts, and all the rest of it. But he does visit cattle farms in his Richmond and Yorkshire constituency, which might not play too well with some very observant Hindus. So he's the Prime Minister, and everybody's saying he's the first Prime Minister of Indian stock. Not quite correct. Cast your minds back to 1812, when the Earl of Liverpool became Prime Minister, and he was 1/8 Indian. Anyway, but as someone who's fully of Indian blood, identifiably Indian, he's taken over. He is, of course, a British citizen. He was born in Southampton, United Kingdom. His grandparents and great-grandparents has shifted from the Punjab to Uganda, then a British colony in Africa. And his parents who moved to the UK in the 1960s as children. So his wife, Akshata Murthy, is an Indian citizen. Anyway, so more about Sunak. So he's trying to signal there is a different style of leadership here. However, some continuity. He wanted to keep most of the cabinet on post, definitely Jeremy Hunt. The UK's just had 4 Chancellor Exchequer in 3 months. It doesn't need a 5th. So Hunt is staying on post. Unfortunately, been several resignations of the cabinet already. I just don't know who it was. It was Robert Buckland, the Attorney General, already. Or no, Brandon Lewis, sorry, the Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice. He stood down. Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was Business Secretary. I can't remember else who's leaving. Chloe Smith, the Work and Pension Secretary. So quite a few posts to fill, unfortunately. I think he can't very well have Suella Braverman back just now, as she resigned only a few days ago. So it's 7 weeks to the day that Liz Truss was appointed, that he's taking over, Rishi Sunak's taking over. There's much disquiet over Liz Truss getting £115,000 per annum for life as a former Prime Minister to run her office. So that's about £2,300 for every day she served as Prime Minister per annum for life. Shocking. So he's got a rather difficult in-tray, to say the least. I thought he was unwise to say the United Kingdom is facing an economic crisis in his speech. He could have said like a difficult economic situation or something like that. But yes, he's got a triple whammy. The pound is low. It has risen a bit since he's come in. There's high inflation, and obviously the energy prices are very high. He's saying they're going to keep the triple lock there on pensions. Triple lock on pensions is there's inflation, there's the rise in wages, or is it 2.5% per annum? Whichever is the highest of those three, that's how much pensions go up by. And of course, there are more and more pensioners. We're living longer. People are staying in education longer. And the Conservative Party relies very heavily on the votes of older people. So it was very loath to hack them off. And Liz Truss was saying the unsayable, that really this is just not viable in the longer term. The whole system is going to be flat, bust, broke, unless we do something, raise the retirement age, have more people enter the workforce younger, more immigration, more contribution at an earlier stage, things like that. A combination of all those. So what's Rishi Sunak going to do? But anyway, he says he's going to earn our trust. He says he's going to fulfill the manifesto promises. Now that was ominous, because one of the things that Liz Truss is trying to do, and so far it looks like Rishi Sunak is also going to try to do, is find an alternative to the Northern Ireland Protocol. The UK could unilaterally repeal it. It's not illegal to end treaties, but it will certainly hack off the European Union, and they can hit back by making trade more difficult than it already is. And it would annoy most people in Northern Ireland. 56% of whom voted Remain. Even those who voted Leave, some of them want, this open border with the Republic of Ireland. soft border, perhaps I should say. The Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP, they want it back. But I'm afraid they can go whistle. There are only 8 of them. They want to be in the United Kingdom. They have that. You can't get everything you want in life. That's what politics is about. It's the art of the possible. This is honourable compromise. And if there's no, the Northern Ireland Executive is not going to be reformed, they won't go into it, the DUP, until this Northern Ireland Protocol situation sort of. If they fail to form an executive within 120 days, there's going to be another election to the Northern Ireland Assembly. That'll be the second this year, although it'll actually be early into 2023. But that might happen. The DUP might really shrink. The Alliance Party and the Ulster Unionist Party take some of their votes, and maybe either of those two parties would be willing to go into coalition with Sinn Féin and the SDLP, and then it'd be sorted. So, Rishi Sunak's got to fill quite a few cabinet posts. He could bring back Shailesh Vara, he could promote BMF Alami, things like that. What he's going to do to keep the markets quiet, to keep people happy, to try and speed up growth. The NHS is facing crunch time. The United Kingdom needs more doctors and nurses. The waiting lists are about 7 million long. There's a trade deal that's been negotiated with India, but India wanted more work visas for Indians to come to the United Kingdom. Now the Conservative Party is reluctant to agree that, because that was one of the reasons for Brexit. Net 350,000 immigration per annum. Admittedly, half that's from the European Union. The UK is outside the European Union now, so not many EU people coming, but just immigration in general. Of course, the Conservative Party wants immigration. It needs immigration. Look at the Rishi Sunak. If it weren't for immigration, his parents would never have come to the UK. But it depends on how much and which individuals and things like that. So, but anyway, he might have to be more pragmatic and deal with that. He might say immigration has lost saliency and so on. So there are a number of notable things about Rishi Sunak, apart from his ethnicity, his religion. He's the second ever Wykehamist to become Prime Minister, the first being Henry Addington, that close ally of William Pitt the Younger. Pitt is to Addington as London is to Paddington, regarded a bit of a non-entity. And Addington was also an Oxonian, like Rishi Sunak. That's not exactly a first. Last 4 Prime Ministers have been Oxford graduates. The majority of Prime Ministers have been Oxford graduates. There's not been a Cambridge graduate as Prime Minister since 1937, Stanley Baldwin. And Henry Addington, like Rishi Sunak, was the son of a doctor. But of course, in those times, over 200 years ago, the upper class held almost all the political offices, and they often looked down their aquiline noses at physicians, thinking they were too hands-on and filthy. Clister pipes used to represent him. So anything else about that? Well, manners maketh man. That's the motto of Winchester College, where Rishi Sunak was old boy, and that maybe that's why he's so courteous. At 42, he's the youngest Prime Minister for 210 years. So Conservative Party needs to appeal to young people, needs to appeal to more ethnic minority people, is doing much better amongst the British Indian community than it did some decades ago. Now, the British Indian community is about 5% of the population, but it's growing fast through immigration and a higher fertility rate. When people move into the UK, they tend to be in their 20s and 30s and having children then. The elderly, people over the age of 80, they're overwhelmingly white and they're dying off. So partly the British Indian community is becoming more conservative, so secure in its position because of embourgeoisement, increasingly affluent and feeling welcome in the Conservative Party, partly because of the example of people like Rishi Sunak. So Sunak gave a relatively long allocution on the steps of number 10 Downing Street, 7.5 minutes. Apart from Boris Johnson, it was the longest in decades, before heading in with his wife, Akshata Murthy, and their 2 little daughters. No doubt they're very miffed with their dad for messing up their half-term by becoming Prime Minister. So there's a lot of goodwill behind him, certainly the party, unite or die, he's saying, and he's right. I think even the Conservative Party's got to come to its senses and see this is really no time for infighting, just cannot afford that. Is redolent to the mid-90s, when the Tory party was tearing itself apart and seemed shambolic, and made Labour seem so much more attractive by a comparison. Labour has learned some very painful lessons about its internecine warfare that it had under Corbyn. They've got a credible, formidable leader in the shape of Sir Keir Starmer, who from a Conservative perspective is capable and dangerous. So, the Conservatives do have a fighting chance in the forthcoming election because of Rishi Sunak. Without him, really, there was none, especially if Boris Johnson came back. As the erstwhile leader of the Conservative Party, Lord Hague, said, the idea that Bojo should come back as Prime Minister was the worst idea he'd heard in 46 years of Conservative Party membership. Notably, William Hague was the MP for Richmond, Yorkshire, just before Sunak took over. So Sunak's only been MP for 7 years before he's ascended to the highest office in the land. So yeah, he's credible, he's ebullient, he's optimistic, he's likeable, he's sensible, he's moderate, he's open to different viewpoints. He won't surround himself with sycophants or just be reinforcing his delusions. He wants to be red-canned, people who will confront him with unwelcome truths. He's objective like that. So in some ways, he's very temperamentally suitable. I think he's actuated by the right reasons. He's not an egomaniac like another leader I could mention, anything like that. He's got tons of money. He's not doing it for the money. And so he may well lose the forthcoming election. You can't win them all. Conservatives won 4 on a trot. Labour are going to win eventually. Would he be dumped as leader? I mean, up to that time, that's always happened. Conservative leaders have tendered their resignation. They'll be voted out if they didn't. But would he stay on? Seemed to be quite credible. He'll only be 44, still has many years in politics ahead of him, could still come back in 10 years or something as Prime Minister. Harold Wilson lost an election and Labour kept him on, and he came back as Prime Minister. Anyway, thank you very much for watching my channel. So make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Bye.
It's probably, I think that